My daughter didn't invite me to her wedding. I didn't even know it was happening. I found out from a Facebook post, a photo of her, in a white dress throwing her head back laughing beside a man I didn't recognize. The caption read, "Forever starts now." I stared at the screen in silence, my coffee going cold in my hands. It was the kind of laugh I hadn't seen from her since she was 12. She looked happy, beautiful, like she belonged, like she'd never needed me. There were other photos, too. My sister was in the front row, hands clasped over her heart, her eyes wet with pride. My ex-husband was in a tuxedo standing beside our daughter, holding her hand, like he'd actually raised her. And there she was, walking down the aisle on his arm, chin, high eyes glowing. Not a single frame included me, not a mention, not even a blurry shot from the back, like I was someone who'd snuck in. Because I wasn't there. I hadn't been invited. No call, no message, no explanation. Just that bright, cruel smile captured in pixels by someone who had taken my place. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, a notification lighting up the screen. "You've been tagged in a photo." My hands trembled when I picked it up. For half a second, I thought maybe she had remembered me, that she'd posted something just for me, a tribute or a note, or even a joke. But it was a group shot, and someone had tagged me by mistake, another woman, same first name, different state. My heart was pounding by then. I had to sit down. I couldn't even cry yet. It was like my mind couldn't catch up with what my body already knew. The betrayal wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It didn't punch. It was quiet, cold. It was the sound of someone not calling, not choosing, not caring. It was silence wrapped in a wedding dress. My daughter, my only child, had removed me from the biggest day of her life, like you scrape off an old sticker, no residue, no guilt, just gone. I walked to the sink and dumped the coffee out. The bitterness lingered in my mouth like burnt words. I watched it swirl and disappear down the drain, and I thought, so that's how it ends. Not with a scream, not with a letter, but with a woman in her 50s standing in a kitchen alone, watching her child get married through someone else's camera lens. My hand brushed the fridge door, and I saw the magnet holding up her 5th grade spelling bee photo. She'd won 2nd place. Her front teeth were missing. I had taken that photo. I had bought the dress she wore that day. I had packed her lunch, braided her hair, stayed up the night before, helping her practice the word perseverance. And now here I was, left out of her life, like I'd never been part of it at all. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the glow from my phone illuminating the room. I scrolled through every photo, every tagged guest, every shared video. I tried to find some clue, some reason. Maybe it was a small ceremony, I told myself. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. But the more I looked, the clearer it became. I hadn't just been forgotten. I had been deliberately excluded. Her father was there. So was his new wife. My sister. Her friends from college. Her godmother. Even her childhood piano teacher. But not me. I, the woman who had carried her for 9 months, who had worked double shifts to buy her first laptop, who had gone without new shoes for years so she could have prom dresses and AP tutors, had not even been told. There was a video shaky but clear of her dancing with her father. The song was soft, something acoustic. Her head on his shoulder, his eyes closed. A moment full of meaning. A moment I'd always thought would be mine. It broke me. Not loudly, quietly. Like something freezing inside my chest until I couldn't move. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stared at the screen and then I turned it off. Placed the phone on the bedside table. Turned to the wall. And whispered to no one. What did I do wrong? The answer didn't come that night, or the next, but the question sat with me, followed me. It brushed against my ankles when I stood at the sink. It curled beside me on the couch. It echoed every time the wind tapped against the windows. What did I do wrong? I went back in my mind to the beginning. To the day I found out I was pregnant with her. I was 24. Working part-time at a hardware store, studying to be a radiology tech, married to a man who kissed my forehead more often than my lips. When I told him, he was silent. Then he said, "Well, that settles it. Guess you're staying home now." I didn't argue. Back then, I still believed in phrases like making it work and for better or worse. I quit school, took prenatal vitamins, learned to make lasagna from scratch because he liked it. When she was born, something inside me split wide open. She had a patch of dark hair and a cry that sounded like indignation. The nurse handed her to me and said, "She's feisty." I remember laughing and whispering, "That's my girl." Her name was Claire. I chose it alone. He didn't care. He was gone most nights by then, drinking sometimes, working, sometimes not. I stopped asking. My days became bottles, spit-up lullabies, and coupons. When she was 6 months old, I started babysitting for the neighbors to afford diapers. I didn't sleep through the night for 3 years. Still, I loved being her mother. Every milestone felt like a parade. The first time she sat up on her own, I cried so hard she thought something was wrong. When she started preschool, I sat in the parking lot for an hour after drop-off, staring at the empty car seat, my arms aching with the phantom weight of her. I stayed with her father until she was 8. By then, the bruises had become regular, not just on me, but on our walls, our furniture, the spaces between words. I left after he smashed her favorite snow globe in a rage. She was in the room. I'll never forget her face, the way her mouth opened but made no sound. That night, while she slept, I packed a single suitcase and left the house with her in my arms. We moved into a shelter the next day. I found work as a home health aide. It didn't pay much, but it was steady. I cleaned houses on weekends, took night classes when I could afford them. I missed birthdays sometimes, not because I forgot, never that, but because I was working. I always left a note, always made it up with pancakes shaped like hearts and trips to the park with stolen packets of ketchup and our only blanket. There were nights she'd come into my room and whisper, "I don't want to go back to Daddy's." I'd hold her close and tell her she never had to, that we were safe now. Just the two of us. By the time she was in high school, things had started to even out. I got my nursing license. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with real windows and a working stove. She got straight A's, joined debate team, applied for colleges. I remember sitting in the kitchen the night she got her NYU acceptance. She screamed so loud the neighbor came running. I hugged her, laughed, cried, and then went straight to the bathroom to be sick from anxiety. Because I didn't know how I'd pay for it. But I knew I would, somehow. I took a night shift at the hospital, sold my mother's ring, cashed out a small life insurance policy I'd been paying into for over a decade. When that wasn't enough, I begged her father to help. He laughed. Said, "She barely talks to me, why would I pay for her?" So I did it, all of it, on my own, quietly, without complaint. Because that's what mothers do, right? But now I look back and wonder, did I make it look too easy? Did she forget the cost because I never showed her the receipt? Did she mistake sacrifice for silence? Because somewhere along the line, the story must have changed. I stopped being the woman who saved her and became the woman she didn't mention. The one who wasn't good enough to sit beside the groom's mother. The one she didn't even warn. The hardest part wasn't that I wasn't invited. It was realizing I hadn't mattered enough to her to explain why. I thought of all the nights I sat up with her feverish body against mine, willing away the heat with prayers. The times I stitched her costumes by hand because store-bought was too expensive. The time I let her dye her hair pink even though I hated it because she said it made her feel brave. Did she remember any of that? Or did she file it away as background noise? Something forgettable? Did she tell her fiancé that I was absent, that I was cold, that I gave her less than she deserved? Maybe I was too tired to argue by the end. Maybe I let too many silences stretch too long. Maybe I taught her how to survive so well, she learned how to leave. I sat at the table for hours that night, the apartment quiet around me. The wedding photos burned into my mind. And somewhere in the hollow place that used to feel full of purpose, a new feeling crept in. Not anger, not even grief, just absence. Like I had been slowly erased one memory at a time. It was the little things that began to ache most. The things that once seemed invisible, ordinary. The sound of her laugh on a voicemail I hadn't deleted. The box of letters she wrote me from summer camp, all full of glitter and uneven hearts. The half-used bottle of her shampoo I kept under the sink long after she stopped coming home for holidays. Grief has a way of camouflaging itself inside the daily. I found it in the grocery store, reaching for the cereal she used to love. I found it in the empty hook where her coat used to hang. In the silence after my phone buzzed, a group message from the hospital. Not her. Always not her. Sometimes I'd start writing a text. Just something small. Thinking of you. Miss you. Hope you're okay. I'd write it sit with it stare at the blinking cursor. And then delete every word. Because I didn't know who I was to her anymore. A nuisance. An embarrassment. A reminder of the life she outgrew. The thing is, Claire was always ambitious. Smart in a way that startled me. She used to correct my grammar in middle school. Once told me at 11 that she didn't want to be trapped by other people's limitations. I admired that in her. I still do if I'm honest. But somewhere along the line, her ambition turned into something sharper. Not a shield, a knife. It cut through everything, even me. It wasn't just her. That's what I had to remind myself. My sister, my ex. The narrative didn't shift in isolation. People helped her rewrite it, fed it, reinforced it. I started to think back to Thanksgiving 3 years ago, the last one we spent together. My sister pulled me aside and said, "Don't be so emotional around Claire. She can't breathe with all that guilt you carry." That stuck with me. Guilt? Was that what she thought she felt from me? I made the turkey. I cleaned the apartment. I gave her my bedroom because her allergies acted up in the guest room. But I'd cried, yes, when she told me she was moving across the country with her then boyfriend. I had cried. I hadn't begged her to stay. I just asked if she'd be okay. Maybe that was the mistake. Maybe that was weakness in her eyes. Love can be loud when it's young, but as the years pass, it quiets down, becomes maintenance, becomes invisible, becomes expected. Maybe I loved her so steadily she forgot it was effort, that it cost something. I remember once when she was 15, she slammed her bedroom door so hard it knocked a photo off the wall. It was one of the few pictures I had of the three of us before the divorce. When I picked it up, the glass had shattered, but the photo was intact. I sat on the hallway floor for nearly an hour, holding it, afraid that if I moved, the whole thing would fall apart. Claire opened the door, eventually, eyes red, but voice calm. She sat beside me, leaned her head on my shoulder, and whispered, "I'm sorry, I'm so much." "You're not too much," I said back. "You're everything." I wonder if she remembers that, or if, like most things from back then, she filed it under a version of me she doesn't believe in anymore. The realization didn't come all at once. It was a slow, creeping ache, like a tide that rises while you sleep and swallows the road behind you. I started to understand that love, no matter how fierce, doesn't guarantee loyalty. That raising someone, sacrificing for someone, even bleeding for someone, doesn't mean they'll choose you when the lights come on. She didn't become cruel. That's not the word. She became distant, polished, polite, and eventually indifferent. The Christmas after she moved to San Francisco, she sent a card. No gift, no phone call. Just a card with a pre-printed message, wishing you warmth and peace. No handwriting, not even "Love, Claire." Just her name typed beneath the message, like she was signing off on a business deal. That card is still in my drawer. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because even the coldest thing from her felt like something. I started talking less about her at work. My coworkers used to ask, "How's your daughter?" and I'd light up. Now I just say, "She's doing well," and change the subject. People don't know what to do with your grief when the person isn't dead, just gone. They expect stories of reconciliation, of lessons learned, of calls returned, and bridges rebuilt. But sometimes the bridge burns quietly, without smoke, without alarm. Sometimes it turns to ash while you're looking the other way. There were nights I lay awake trying to list my faults, the ways I may have failed her. I wondered if I was too soft, too tired, too human. Maybe I didn't shield her enough from my own cracks. Maybe I didn't celebrate her the way her father did, with money and big gestures and flashy approval. But then I'd remember the small things. The way she used to climb into my lap even when she was too big for it. The way she used to draw hearts around my name on Mother's Day cards. The time she told me after winning a speech competition, "I owe this to you, Mom. You taught me how to use my voice." And now here I was, voiceless, uninvited, unchosen. The grief didn't end. It just softened. Settled into the folds of my life like old injuries you learn to walk around. But the silence that stayed sharp. It was a Thursday afternoon when the email came. I was on break at the hospital, eating soup out of a thermos in the staff room, while reruns played on the muted TV above the vending machines. The subject line read, "A memory you might enjoy." From Linda Campbell, my sister. I hadn't heard from her in over a year. My heart stuttered. For a moment, I thought it might be a peace offering, a sign. Maybe Claire had told her to reach out. Maybe there had been some softening, some awareness that I'd been left out like trash by the curb. I clicked it open. There was no message, just a link. I hesitated, then tapped. It was a video, professionally shot, a compilation of moments from Claire's wedding reception. I knew the venue, an old estate just north of Napa with glass walls and lavender gardens. I had once mentioned it to Claire years ago when she was a teenager. "If you ever get married, we should visit it together," I'd said. She'd nodded, barely listening, lost in some fantasy about flowers and fireworks. And now, here it was. Her wedding, captured in high resolution. I watched it. I told myself I wouldn't, but I did. She looked radiant. Her dress was simple, elegant. Her hair pulled back in soft waves, her smile unguarded. She moved through the crowd like someone deeply loved, confident, at peace. The video panned to her dancing with her father, then raising a toast with her bridal party. Laughter, glasses clinking, her friends in pastel gowns. My sister at the head table, then the speeches. Her father stood, his voice thick with pride. "Claire has always been determined, strong, a fighter. I wish I could take credit for that, but really." She raised herself. The room erupted in soft laughter. Claire beamed. I couldn't breathe. She came through life with resilience. He continued, and with the help of incredible people along the way. Her stepmother, her aunts, her mentors. I waited. I waited for my name, even a whisper of it. Nothing. My name was never spoken. It was like I'd died and no one remembered to write the obituary. But then, something worse. The groom began his speech. He thanked her parents for the woman she had become. He looked toward her father and her stepmother. "You welcomed me into your family with open arms," he said, his voice soft with emotion. "Claire is who she is because of the love, the structure, the example you set." And the camera panned to them, both of them holding hands, smiling faces glowing. I closed the laptop. I think I was in shock. My hands were trembling. My mouth was dry. I sat there, the noise of the staff room returning around me in a dull hum. A nurse talking about a patient down the hall. Someone laughing at something on their phone. The microwave beeping. But inside, I was silent. It wasn't just the wedding. It was the erasure. The deliberate cut. Not forgotten, omitted. There was a difference. A forgetting might sting, but this was surgical, a choice. And it confirmed what I hadn't let myself believe. She didn't want me there. She didn't want me at all. I walked back to my unit like a sleepwalker. I don't remember what I charted that day. I don't remember the faces I cleaned, the medications I administered, the vitals I recorded. I just remember the hallway lights flickering and the weight in my chest getting heavier with every step. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, something I rarely do. I stood in front of the hallway closet and pulled down the wedding gift I had bought 6 months earlier. A crystal vase she'd mentioned once in passing during a phone call back when she still called. I had wrapped it carefully, written a note. For the next chapter, love, Mom. I never mailed it. Now I unwrapped it, sat it on the table, stared at it. And then before I could stop myself, I picked it up and hurled it against the wall. It shattered, spectacularly. 1,000 sharp pieces raining down onto the floor. The sound was like thunder, like grief finally finding a voice. I stood there, chest heaving, heart racing, the wine glass still in my hand, and I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. This was the moment I stopped pretending, not just to her, but to myself. She didn't forget to invite me. She chose not to. And suddenly, everything made sense. The distant phone calls, the vague excuses, the way she'd flinched when I mentioned her childhood, the way she never asked me to visit her new home. She wasn't busy. She was done. And that finally was the truth I couldn't unsee. I didn't sleep that night. I cleaned the glass with bare hands, picking each shard like it meant something, bleeding quietly onto paper towels. There was a strange calm in it. The way pain focused my body made everything else fall away. Around 3 a.m, I stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring at the space where the vase had been. My palms stinging with tiny cuts, and thought, she rewrote me. Not with a single act, but over years. A revision here, a silence there. Until eventually I became a footnote. Or not even that. I didn't go to work the next day. I called out, told them I had a stomach bug. The truth was, I just couldn't carry anyone else's pain that day. Mine was too loud. That evening, I sat down and opened the email again. Watched the video all the way through. It hurt, yes, but it also made something inside me settle. I saw her, this new version of her, the woman who no longer looked back. And I realized something important. I was no longer part of her story. So I decided to write one of my own. Not a dramatic letter, not a plea. I didn't want answers anymore. I didn't want apologies. I just wanted to be heard, even if only by myself. I wrote for hours, pages and pages, memories, confessions, love letters, even anger. I wrote about the nights she slept on my chest, with one tiny hand curled in my hair. About the time she drew a picture of me as a superhero and said, "You always save me, even when you're tired." I wrote about how proud I was the day she graduated high school, and how I cried all the way home after dropping her off at NYU, hiding it so she wouldn't feel guilty. And then, at the very end, I wrote this: "Claire, if you ever read this, know that I loved you more than air, that I bled for you quietly, that I would do it all again even now. But I also know now that love isn't always enough to keep someone close, and that's okay. You are free, and so am I." I folded the pages, sealed them in an envelope, wrote her name on the front, and then I placed it in a box. Not to be sent, just to be acknowledged. 2 days later, I found out about the second reception. It was a dinner, smaller, more intimate, hosted by the Groom's family at a vineyard outside of town. I knew the place. I'd been once, years ago, for a friend's birthday. I'd remembered the scent of rosemary in the garden, the wooden beams in the tasting room, the way the tables were always set with linen napkins and wildflowers. I don't know what made me go. Maybe I wanted to see her again. Maybe I wanted to show her that I still existed, that I hadn't disappeared just because she'd closed the door. Or maybe, and this was the truth I didn't admit even to myself, maybe I just wanted to be seen. I wore the navy blue suit I'd saved for special occasions. The one I'd worn to her high school graduation, when I sat in the back row because her father had claimed the front. I looked at myself in the mirror, before leaving, eyes tired, hair swept back, hands steady. When I arrived, the parking lot was nearly full. I recognized her father's car. My sister's too. I walked toward the entrance, heart pounding so hard I thought I might faint. Every step felt like I was walking underwater. When I reached the door, I paused, almost turned back. But I didn't. The hostess looked at me then, down at the guest list. I gave my name. She frowned. I don't think she began, but then someone stepped in behind her. It was an older man, tall, with a silver beard and kind eyes. He looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "You must be Claire's mother." I nodded, unable to speak. He stepped forward, extended his hand. "I'm Tom, father of the groom. We've heard almost nothing about you." There was a pause. My stomach twisted. He looked over his shoulder at the tables, at the laughing, well-dressed guests, then back at me. "Would you like to come in?" he asked. "It would be wrong if you didn't." I looked past him and saw her. Claire. She was standing beside her husband, wine glass in hand, laughing at something he'd said. Her hair caught the light. She hadn't seen me yet. I took a breath and walked in. The room hushed as I entered. My sister's eyes widened. My ex stiffened, but I kept walking, not fast, not slow, just enough to make it clear that I belonged, even if no one else believed it. And then, mid-sentence, Claire turned. Her eyes met mine. Her face didn't change. No smile, no anger, just a stillness, as if her body had been paused by some unseen hand. We stood there, mother and daughter, in that strange, suspended silence. I didn't wave, didn't speak, but I nodded, once, then turned and walked toward the door. Tom caught up to me halfway. "Ma'am," he said, gently touching my arm. "Whatever story they told, I don't think it's the full one." I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in years, someone looked back without judgment. Just truth. "I know," I said quietly. Then I left. I didn't cry in the car. That surprised me. I thought maybe the tears would hit the second I pulled away from the vineyard, but they didn't. I just sat there in the driver's seat for a long time, watching the sun begin to dip behind the hills, bleeding gold across the dashboard. My hands were folded in my lap. The navy suit still smelled faintly of lavender from my detergent, the same detergent I used on Claire's blankets when she was little. I drove home in silence, no music, no calls. Just the soft hum of tires on pavement and the ache of something shifting in my chest. When I got home, I took off my shoes and stood in the entryway. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. I had crossed a line. Not one she had drawn, one I had. And that night, I slept. Not fitfully, not in pieces, but the heavy, full kind of sleep that only comes after you stop holding something that was never yours to carry. The next morning, I woke up to an envelope slid under my door. I live in a small apartment complex. People know each other here. I opened the door, looked both ways, but the hallway was empty. Inside, the envelope was a folded piece of notebook paper. I recognized the handwriting, immediately, clumsy teenage all caps. "Miss L," it read. "I saw you yesterday, at the winery. You looked like a queen. I don't know what happened, but I just want to say, I hope they saw it too." No signature, just that. It was the neighbor's boy. His mother passed last year, and I check in on him sometimes, leave a casserole now and then. He's quiet, awkward, wears hoodies, even in the heat. But he noticed. He saw. I stood in the hallway holding that note, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Because the truth is, I didn't go to the reception for Claire. I went for myself, to be seen, to take up space, to step out from behind the curtain I'd quietly hid behind for decades, convincing myself that motherhood was synonymous with erasure. That silence was strength. That love meant disappearing so someone else could shine. But I was wrong. Love isn't silence. Love is showing up even when it hurts. Love is walking into a room where you are not wanted and standing tall anyway. That week, I started rearranging the apartment. Nothing drastic, just small things. I took down the old pictures of Claire. Not out of spite, but because they were starting to feel like artifacts in a museum I no longer ran. I folded them into a box, placed it gently on the top shelf of my closet. I left one on the mantel, the one where she's 6 in her red raincoat holding a pine cone and grinning like she's just discovered magic. That one I kept. I started watering the plants again, lit candles, put on music while I cleaned. It was strange how empty the apartment felt at first, like a theater after the audience leaves. But then, over time, I began to hear other sounds. My own breath. My own laughter. The click of my keyboard as I started writing again. Old essays, half-formed stories, bits of memory I wanted to pin down before they dissolved completely. One afternoon, I found a voicemail from her. Just a few seconds. Hey, I heard you were at the dinner. I wasn't expecting that. Hope you're okay. That was all. No apology, no bridge. But something about her voice, unsteady, a little uncertain, made me pause. I didn't call her back, not because I was angry, but because I wasn't ready to hear more silence on the other end. Instead, I went for a walk. The air was warm, just past spring, not yet summer. I stopped by the bookstore, bought a new journal, got a coffee, sat on a bench in the park, and listened to the children laughing in the distance. And I wrote her name, just her name, Claire. Then I wrote mine, not Mom, not Mother, just my name. The one I was born with, the one I hadn't used in years. It felt strange. It felt like coming home. The next week passed quietly. No more messages, no more whispers through the hallway cracks. The world didn't change, but something in me had. I moved through my routines like someone remembering herself. I got up earlier. I started reading again. Not just news or articles or Facebook comments, but novels ones with complicated women who didn't always get what they wanted, but still kept walking. I spent a whole Saturday cleaning the closet. Not just organizing clearing. I filled 3 trash bags with things I'd been saving for decades. Claire's childhood artwork, old birthday cards from people I no longer knew, clothes that didn't fit but used to mean something. For years, I'd kept them because I thought letting them go meant betrayal, that throwing them away meant erasing love. But now I understood something deeper. Objects aren't love. Memory isn't a shrine. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is release something before it rots. In one of the old boxes, I found a letter I'd written to Claire when she left for college. I hadn't even remembered writing it. The paper was folded delicately, still creased like a flower, but the ink had started to fade. Claire, it began, If I could bottle every moment of your childhood and press it into your palm before you leave, I would. If I could carry the whole world on my back so you could walk freely, I'd do it without complaint. But life doesn't work like that. You have to go forward, and I have to let you. Just promise me this: don't forget where you came from. Not the place, the person. Don't forget that I loved you when it cost everything. I stared at it for a long time, then read it aloud, and then I burned it. Not out of anger, but because I had already lived it. There was nothing left in it for me now. The next morning, I got an email. It wasn't from Claire. It was from her husband. I stared at the sender's name for a long time before opening it. "Hi, Ms. L," it began. "I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I wanted to thank you for coming to the dinner. I know Claire didn't expect it, but I think deep down she needed to see you. She hasn't said much since, but I know she's been quieter than usual, thoughtful. I also wanted to tell you. Tom, my father, mentioned that he spoke to you. He was really moved, said he felt like he'd just witnessed something sacred. I don't know what that moment meant for you, but I think it opened something in her even if she doesn't realize it yet. No expectations, just thank you for showing up. That takes more courage than people give credit for." I read it twice, then a third time, and for the first time in months, I let myself cry. Not the bitter, choking sobs of rejection, but the soft, relieved kind that come when someone finally says, "I see you." I didn't write back. There was nothing to say. Nothing that wouldn't sound like yearning. Instead, I opened my old laptop and started writing again. Really writing. My story. Not just the one about Claire, the one before her, the one after her, the one about being a woman who gave everything and then had to learn how to hold something back for herself. The story didn't come out smooth or elegant. It was clumsy at first. I kept stopping to remember details: how my hands looked the day I signed my divorce papers, how the sky smelled after the night she first walked. The shame I carried for years about not being enough in the way people expected. But the more I wrote, the lighter I felt. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was trying to understand it. The pain didn't vanish, but it changed shape. Became something I could hold instead of something that held me. A week later, I went to the local print shop and had the first 30 pages bound. Not for publication, just for me. When the woman at the counter handed it to me, she said, "Are you a writer?" And I smiled. "Yes," I said. It felt true. There was something about hearing myself say it. "Yes, I'm a writer," that lingered in the back of my throat for days. Like the echo of a truth I'd buried too long under diapers bills over time and the quiet martyrdom of motherhood. I didn't tell anyone else about the manuscript. Not my coworkers, not my neighbor, certainly not Claire. It wasn't for them. It was mine. I started walking again. Every morning before my shift, I'd take the long route through the neighborhood, past the elementary school she once attended. I used to wait on that sidewalk for her, watching her run down the steps, her backpack bouncing hair always in some kind of wild rebellion. She never walked, always charged toward me like I was the finish line. Now the children running out weren't mine. I was just another woman passing by. But sometimes, I'd pause a second longer near the bike racks, just to remember what it was like to be needed. One afternoon in late spring, I got a text from my sister. Just one sentence. "She's pregnant." I stared at the screen for a long time, my mind blank. No name, no greeting, no explanation. Just that. I didn't reply, not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't sure if that door had been cracked open or if she was simply standing behind it, waiting to see if I'd knock. I went to the cabinet and pulled down the photo box again. Not to look at the pictures this time, but to find one in particular. A photo of me holding Claire when she was 2 days old. My eyes were swollen with exhaustion, hair pulled back hospital gown slipping off my shoulder. But I was smiling, not the polite kind, the kind that splits you open because something holy just happened inside your life. I kept the photo out, propped it up on my desk next to my manuscript. I wondered if Claire would feel that too. That same terror and awe, that same bone-deep love. I wondered if she'd understand me differently then. But I didn't let myself hope too hard. Hope I was learning could be a kind of grief too. 2 weeks later, I got a card in the mail. No return address, just my name in delicate cursive. Inside was a single note on cream paper. I didn't invite you because I was afraid of your judgment, of your sadness, of how much I still need you. I've spent so long trying to be someone new that I forgot the parts of me you built. I don't know how to fix this, but I wanted you to know you were never nothing to me. You were everything. See, I didn't cry, not then. I held the card in my hands, ran my fingers over the ink, as if touching it could make the words settle deeper into my skin. I read it again and again. Each time something in me loosened like a knot that had held my chest tight for years was finally starting to unravel. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know how. Forgiveness wasn't a door I could fling open. It was a path overgrown and uneven, and I'd need time to find my footing. But I placed her note next to mine, the one I'd written months ago, and never sent. 2 fragments of a broken bridge, not yet touching, but not gone. That night, I dreamed of her as a child again. She was standing in the kitchen, barefoot, holding a bowl of flour and grinning. "I'm making pancakes," she said, "but I forgot the eggs." Her voice was so high, her eyes so big, and I could feel myself laughing. I reached out to take the bowl from her to help. And then I woke. The room was still dark, but I felt light somehow. Not whole, but no longer splintered. I sat up, walked to the living room, and opened the curtains. The first hint of dawn was just beginning to stretch across the buildings. I stood there a long time, the card in my hand. Eventually, I whispered into the silence, "I still love you." Not because she'd apologized, not because things were fixed, but because that part of me had never gone away. And maybe it didn't need to. Weeks passed. The card stayed on my desk untouched, but not ignored. I'd glance at it in the mornings while I drank my coffee, sometimes resting my fingertips on it like I needed to remember it was real. There was a warmth in the silence. Now not the biting cold of rejection, but the tentative hush of something trying to grow roots again. I didn't tell anyone about it, not my sister, not even the boy down the hall who'd left me the note. This was something sacred, fragile, like holding a bird that had flown back to your hand after years of staying away. You don't grip it. You don't speak too loud. You just let it sit there, see what it wants to do. Then came another letter. This time in Claire's handwriting. I knew it before I opened the envelope. She always looped her L's too wide and dotted her I's low like punctuation didn't need to stand tall. There were only a few lines. I don't expect anything. I just wanted to tell you I'm scared. The baby's due in October. Sometimes I catch myself calling your name in my head, like when I can't sleep or when I'm worried I'll be a bad mother. I don't know what I'm asking by writing this. I just didn't want you to think I was pretending you didn't exist anymore. It was signed Just Claire. No love, no flourish. But it was more honest than anything I'd received from her in years. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it inside the same envelope as her first card. Two voices layered on top of each other, both reaching for something wordless and difficult. I sat in my chair for a long time, staring out the window. The sky was pale and soft. There was a wind that kept pressing itself against the glass like it wanted in. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I went to work. I tended to my patients. I fed them, washed them, sat with them through their silence. I held the hand of a woman whose son hadn't visited in years. I helped a man whisper goodbye to a wife he couldn't quite remember anymore. In all those quiet rooms, I kept hearing Claire's words. I'm scared. She had never said that to me, not even as a child. She'd always wanted to be brave even when she was small. She used to bandage her own knees after a fall, refusing my help. I've got it, she'd say, chin up, lip trembling. But I always stayed close anyway, just in case. Now she was falling again, not visibly, but inside. And this time, she'd reached for me. I wrote back. It took a few tries. I crumpled the first 3 drafts. Too formal, too emotional, too much. But the 4th time, I just wrote like I was sitting across from her, like we were in the same room, like it was a Tuesday afternoon, and she was 16 again and tired of the world. Claire, I began. I can't undo the silence between us. I can't make you remember me the way I remember you. But I want you to know this. You are not alone. Fear doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. You were brave the day you were born, and you've been brave every day since, even when I didn't understand the way you chose to live that bravery. If you ever need me, truly need me, I will come. No judgment, no shame, just a chair beside your bed and my hand in yours. That's all. I signed it for the first time in years, Mom. No flourish, no guilt, just a hand extended in the dark. I mailed it without ceremony, walked it down to the corner box and dropped it in. Let the red flag swing up behind me. The street was quiet. The sun was setting. When I got home, I opened the box of baby things I hadn't touched in years. I found her first blanket, pale green, with a tear in one corner from where she used to suck on it while falling asleep. I held it against my face and inhaled, but it only smelled like time now. Still, I folded it carefully and set it aside. Then I found the shoes, tiny white ones, no scuffs. She'd barely worn them. I had bought them with money I didn't have, choosing them over groceries that week. I remembered thinking, she'll walk in these one day. She'll run. I placed them in a small box and tied it with ribbon. No note, just a gesture. And then I waited, not with expectation, just with space in my life again. A seat beside me open, a part of my heart that had been boarded up unlocked. 3 weeks passed. No letter, no call. Just the ordinary rhythm of life returning work shifts, laundry half-read books on the arm of the couch. I didn't check the mailbox compulsively, though I did check it. I didn't let myself spin hope into a story, but I kept the small box with the baby shoes near the door just in case. And then, one morning, while I was watering the plants on my balcony, I saw her. Claire, standing by the curb in a blue sweater holding her purse like a shield. Hair pulled back in a low bun, face pale even from that distance. I froze, the watering can tilting in my hand. For a moment, I wondered if she was a dream, a flicker from the past, rising like steam in the morning light. But then she looked up, straight at me, and she didn't wave, didn't smile. She just waited. I left the balcony in silence. My knees trembled as I walked down the stairs. I paused before opening the front door, hand on the knob, breathing slowly. I didn't know what I would see on the other side. A daughter, a stranger, both. When I stepped outside, she was still there, closer now. Up close, she looked thinner. Not unhealthy, just stripped down like someone in the middle of becoming. Her eyes met mine, and for a second, neither of us spoke. Then quietly, she said, "I got your letter." I nodded, unsure if I could speak without my voice shaking. She reached into her bag and pulled something out, a sonogram, folded at the corners. She held it between us like an offering. "I didn't know if I should come," she whispered, eyes not quite meeting mine. "But I didn't know where else to go." Still, I didn't say anything. I watched her, watched the way her hands trembled slightly, the way she kept swallowing, like every word had to be negotiated with herself first. "I was so angry at you," she finally said, "for things that weren't really yours. Things I didn't have the language to blame anyone else for. It was easier to turn it on you." I waited. She went on, "You were always tired, and I didn't understand why. I thought you were distant, but I didn't see what you were carrying." Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes fast and unannounced. She swiped at them quickly, the way she used to when she scraped her knee and didn't want to look weak. "I thought if I erased you," she said, her voice breaking, "I could be someone new, someone untouched. But I see now that I am made of you, whether I like it or not." The silence between us stretched, but it didn't feel cruel. It felt sacred, full of things neither of us had said for years. I finally stepped forward, reached out slowly, gently, and placed my hand on hers. The same hand I'd held when she took her first steps. The same hand that had pushed me away again and again. She let me. "Come inside," I said, my voice low. She nodded, and we walked together, not as mother and daughter, not yet, but as two women who had finally stopped pretending they hadn't hurt each other. Inside, I made tea, poured it into mismatched mugs. She sat at the table, cradling the sonogram in her lap, like something ancient. Her belly wasn't showing much yet, but her body already moved differently, slower, more cautious, like a shoreline bracing for tide. She took a sip of the tea, then looked at me, really looked. Can I ask you something? Of course, I said. What if I mess it up? The words were barely audible, and without thinking, I reached across the table and took her hand again. You will, I said. We all do, but you'll also love that child harder than you ever knew was possible, and that love will teach you everything. She nodded, eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in her in years. Not innocence. Not regret, but recognition. I don't expect us to go back, she said. I don't know if we can. We can't. I answered. But maybe forward? She asked. And this time, I smiled. Maybe. That night, she stayed for dinner. I made pasta the same kind she used to love when she was 6, slathered in too much butter, served with peas she used to push to the side. She still did. We didn't talk about the wedding, or the years in between. We talked about the baby, about names, about cravings and nausea and nursery colors. I didn't ask for too much, didn't reach for what hadn't been offered. But when she left, she hugged me, softly, like an apology wrapped in skin, and I held her. Not tightly, just long enough for her to know I was still here. The days that followed were quiet, but different. Not heavy with silence, but open with possibility. Claire didn't call every day I didn't expect her to. But every few mornings my phone would buzz with a photo of the baby's crib arriving in a box. A half-painted nursery wall. Her hand on her growing belly with the caption, "He's kicking like he's got somewhere to be." Sometimes it would just be a song she remembered from childhood. A recipe she wanted to try. A question about swaddling. We weren't back where we started. But we were somewhere new, somewhere slower, gentler, more grown. I'd take her calls in the evenings, usually after her husband had gone to bed. Her voice was softer now, less armored. Sometimes she'd talk about the things she was afraid of, the pain, the responsibility, the way love could be so big, it felt like drowning. I didn't rush to reassure her. I just listened. Let her circle around the edges of her fear without trying to drag her out of it. Let her be vulnerable without offering to save her. One night, she asked, "Did you ever think you'd be good at this?" This I asked. Being a mom. I laughed a soft, tired sound. No, not once. I was always too busy surviving it to even consider if I was good. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You were." I didn't say anything, because if I had, I might have broken. There were still things we didn't talk about, things that hovered at the edge of every conversation, like a shadow waiting for light. The wedding, the years apart, the moments she'd erased me from her life. I didn't press. I didn't prod. But one Sunday, she showed up at my door. No call ahead, just a knock. I opened it to find her standing there, in a loose t-shirt and jeans, no makeup, eyes tired. "I want to show you something," she said. I didn't ask questions, just grabbed my keys and followed her down to her car. She drove us across town to a quiet neighborhood, pulled up in front of a small house, with ivy curling around the porch columns and wind chimes swaying in the breeze. "This is where we're moving after the baby comes," she said. "It's not much, but it has a yard, and the baby's room gets the morning light." We walked inside. The air smelled like fresh paint and dust. Boxes stacked in corners, echoes bouncing off empty rooms. She led me to the nursery. The walls were soft gray. There was a crib by the window, a rocking chair in the corner, and on the dresser the small white shoes I had given her, centered like an altar. She turned to me. "I'm not trying to make up for everything," she said. "I don't think I can, but I want you to be part of his life. If you want to." I took a step closer. The shoes looked impossibly small. My fingers itched to reach out and hold them, but I kept them still. "I do," I said. She nodded, tears building in her eyes. "I didn't understand," she whispered. "I didn't see it all you gave. All you gave up. You weren't supposed to," I said quietly. "That was the job, to give and not ask, to protect you from knowing how hard it really was. But now I'm starting to," she said, "and it hurts. It really hurts." She sat down in the rocking chair and looked up at me. "I don't think I hated you. I think I hated how much of you I had in me, and I didn't want to carry your pain. But I see now. It wasn't pain you gave me. It was endurance." I walked over and knelt beside her, took her hands in mine. "You don't owe me anything," I said. "But if you want me, I'm here, however you need. Or don't." She pulled me in, held me tighter than she had in over a decade, and whispered, "I do." We sat there for a long time, the empty room breathing around us, the late afternoon light softening everything. There was no music, no poetry, just two women, one becoming, one remembering, finding their way back through shared silence and broken years. Eventually she stood. "I'm starving," she said with a shaky smile. "Want to get dinner?" We picked up takeout from the diner we used to go to when she was little, the one with the cracked red booths and lemon pie so tart it made your eyes water. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about strollers, about baby names, about whether or not it was worth getting a diaper genie. And for the first time in years, I laughed with her. Really laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from a place no bitterness could ever reach. Later that night, she dropped me off at my apartment. Before she left, she turned and said, "He's going to call you Nana if that's okay." It took me a moment to find my voice. "That's more than okay," I said. She smiled, eyes glinting. "Good, because he's going to need someone fierce in his corner." I watched her drive away, the tail lights fading into the soft blue night. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt home. The months that followed unfolded not in leaps, but in slow, quiet inches. Trust didn't rush back in like a flood. It crept in careful and uncertain, like sunlight feeling its way through curtains that had stayed shut too long. Claire started calling more regularly. Little things at first, a recipe she couldn't remember, questions about fevers and swollen ankles, whether it was normal to forget things while pregnant. I answered them all gently, like I was whispering to a version of her that still sat with scraped knees and wild hair on our old living room rug. Sometimes she'd ask me to come to doctor's appointments when her husband couldn't leave work. The first time I sat in the waiting room afraid she might change her mind before the nurse called her in. But when they did, she looked over her shoulder and simply said, "You coming?" I did. I sat beside her, listened to the heartbeat thumping like a bird in her belly, and watched her eyes flutter closed. She was crying, but silently, like I had so many times when she was small, and I didn't want her to see the weight of my worry. "It's real," she whispered. "It always was," I said. We never discussed the wedding, not once. It hovered like a ghost, always in the room, but we left it alone. Maybe that was grace. Maybe it was fear. Either way, I didn't need to rehash it anymore. I'd already survived the worst of it. One weekend in September, she came over to my apartment with a tote bag full of baby clothes. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said, pouring tiny onesies and bibs onto my kitchen table. I bought too much, or not enough, or the wrong kind entirely. I just laughed and helped her sort them. "You'll figure it out," I said. "Most of it you learn the hard way anyway." She held up a pair of soft gray booties and frowned. "Why does this make me want to cry?" "Because it's about to stop being just you," I said. She looked at me, then really looked, and said, "I'm sorry I made it so hard for you to still be here." I shook my head. "You didn't make it hard. Life did. You just didn't know how to let me in through the mess." "And you stayed anyway," she said. Her voice was so quiet I almost missed it. I nodded. "Of course I did. One night, close to her due date, she called me in tears. 'I had a dream I couldn't find him,' she said, panicked. 'I was in a grocery store, and he was just gone. Like I left him on a shelf and couldn't remember where.' What if I'm not ready?" "You're ready because you're scared," I said. "The mothers who worry are always the ones who love hardest." When the call ended, I sat up for hours in the dark hand over my heart, remembering all the nights I had felt that same fear, that same knot of panic, and how I'd survived it over and over. She went into labor 3 weeks early. I was at work when she called. She didn't say much, just, "It's time." I could hear the fear behind her voice, thin and cracking like ice underfoot. I left the hospital in my scrubs badge still clipped to my collar and drove straight to hers. I was the second person she asked for after the baby arrived. Her husband was first. The nurse handed him to me, pink, furious, tiny fists curled into fury. But when I held him close, he quieted. His breath puffed against my neck. I rocked him gently, letting the memory of every time I had done this before wash over me. Claire was watching me, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion, skin pale, but her mouth curled in something so soft it broke me. "He already knows you," she said. I looked down at him. He knows what love feels like. We stayed in that room for hours. I held him. Then I held her. Not like a child, not like a mother. Just one woman holding another who had bled and survived. When I went home that night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch until dawn, watching the light change the color of the floorboards. I pressed my palm to my chest and whispered his name aloud, just once, to make it real. Caleb. His name was Caleb. A week later, Claire sent me a photo of him sleeping in the blue blanket I had crocheted before she was born. I hadn't known she'd kept it, and beneath the photo she'd written only this: "He already loves you." That's when I understood. I hadn't lost her. I had just lived long enough to meet the version of her that could finally come home. Some treasures had been recovered. Others, more valuable, still had been discovered for the first time. It wasn't the ending I'd expected. It was better, harder, clearer, more honest. It was mine. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.